With that, I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Michelle Pandolfi. Michelle comes to us. She's a great friend of the firm, and she's here to talk about developing a transition team for caregiving, something we all have to do as we do this. I know, like, I started developing my own team. Michelle and I actually talked a little bit about that at one point and having a team and what I had to do. So with that, I'm going to shut up for you, Michelle, and let you take it away.
All right. So today we're going to talk about, how do you create that care team? How do you ensure you have the right people on that care team for the right situations? And then how do you communicate everything that needs to be communicated? Because there's always a lot. But the why, because we think about, okay, there's all different kinds of scenarios that can happen, but why create a care team, a transitions care team? And my kind of attitude on this is you kind of always want to be prepared for the what ifs. You want to think through kind of what if there's a change in condition? Wonder if I'm out of town? What if, there's a weather event? There's all different kinds of things that can happen. And so you want to be prepared for that so you're not scrambling kind of last minute. It's a really way to be preventive versus reactive in situations. Too often when we're reactive, we're really emotional during that time. And so even the most logical of people can start to forget, what different options are out there because you are functioning off adrenaline, you're functioning off of kind of those emotions. I always look at, when you can be as preventive as possible, when you can be prepared, when you can plan, you do get to reduce your stress. So your stress levels will be lower. But you can also, reduce the amount of potential for caregiver burnout. Sometimes, especially if there's different transitions or, different scenarios that you're constantly dealing with that you hadn't planned for, it can be really difficult. And so sometimes, it's can lead more to the like, oh gosh, I'm out or I can't do this anymore. And then you put yourself at risk. And as caregivers, we really need to remember that caregiver stress is real. There's been plenty of situations where caregivers have become ill or passed away, even before the person that you're caring for have. The biggest one, though, when planning for a care transitions team is that without proper planning, your available choices and options become really limited. And I think if you plan ahead, you know what your options are, they remain available to you, they remain wide. I always say to families that I'm working with, I've said it in my own family as a caregiver myself, that when you are in the middle of a crisis, you are limited to the options of the immediate situation that you're in and the people that you're working with. So you're limited to what they know. And that could just be a little bit part of what the options are when you look at the bigger picture. So really, if by doing your homework and planning ahead, you can really make sure that your options remain really vast. So where do you begin? I always like to start with what's most important. So the person you're caring for, do you know what their goals are? Do you know what their life goals are? Do you know what the goals are, for the remainder of their condition, their illness, kind of whatever scenario you're thinking of? What are their well-being preferences? What do they desire? What's important to them as far as dignity? What's important to them as far as, what they can get out of life? What do they value? And so when you're thinking about creating a care transitions team, you're going to want people who are going to honor those goals, those, preferences, those desires, what they want out of life. You're not going to want somebody who's going to try to fight for, what they think is best, but what the person that you're caring for really wants. You want to think about your own goals, your own well-being preferences and desires. What do you value? And then certainly you're going to want to reconcile those if they differ. So have you had those conversations about, here's how I feel, here's how you feel, do we make a compromise together on this, or how is it that you're going to play those out, especially if there are differences? So having those conversations, in your families, with the important people in your life is really important so that you can determine what kind of care team that you need and who needs to be on those care teams. So then second, I always think about what kind of, what various types of crises do we want to plan for? So some of the most common ones, you're going to have hospitalizations. It could be a hospitalization because there's an accident or an injury. It could be a change in status. So think about what would present for somebody to go to the hospital with. With changes of condition, you're going to think of, is it a new diagnosis? Are there functional need changes that now you have to plan for and put care in place for? Are there cognition changes or brain change that may be happening, whether that's acute or whether that's ongoing, and just a decline of that? We do live in a state where weather events you do have to plan for. We have snowstorms, we have power outages, we have floods, evacuations. I see that I have a typo there. Sorry, everyone. But you're going to want to plan for those things. I mean, we had a tornado here in Connecticut, and you had to plan for, what if that happens. The other thing too is you're going to want to plan for end of life. What is it that you're going to want? What is the person you're caring for wants? And so those members of your care team will depend on the situation that you have at hand. And so when you think of a care team, it's not necessarily one just kind of stagnant team, but it's going to be a team that kind of lives and it ebbs and flows depending on what your needs are. So how do you actually form the care transitions team? Again, thinking of kind of those ebbs and flows. I always like to start really big and broad and cover the basics. Kind of what are the essentials that we need to make sure that we cover, and then you're going to kind of narrow it down. But who are your go-tos for the big stuff? So who is your primary care physician? Who is that medical provider that is kind of the primary person that you're always going to go to based on the condition, if it's a specialist or your primary care physician? So who is that person? How do you get in touch with them? Kind of what's your relationship with them? And then, of course, you're going to need an attorney for financial power of attorney, healthcare representative, Medicaid planning, community-based service eligibility. You're going to want to think of all those different things, but an attorney can help you navigate, and certainly the attorney's team can help you navigate those different things. You may need a financial planner, an accountant, whatever you're looking at. Who's going to help you plan for the longer term? How do you know that you can fund whatever care may be needed? And then you're going to want to look to see, okay, what kind of insurance coverage do we have? What kind of medical insurance coverage do we have? Long-term care insurance that may be there. Again, who's kind of your go-to for the bigger stuff? And then I always like to talk about the what ifs of facility-based care. So if facility-based care is an option or it's not an option, if it is, what are those preferences? Hospice has both hospice at home and there's inpatient hospice. So what are those preferences? And you want to advocate for the person being cared for. So again, when you're thinking of all of these go-to people to cover the broad stuff, are they going to be able to honor the goals and wishes of the person you're caring for? Now, I bring up hospice preferences. A lot of people are facility-based preferences. I bring that up because in just a conversation I had with my mom, I just had assumed that she would want to, be taken care of at home for as long as possible. And so I would have fought tooth and nail to keep her home, to do all the things that she wanted. And she all of a sudden one day said to me, she goes, "Oh gosh, no, I could never live at home. I don't want to die here." And I said, "Really?" I said, I was just so surprised by it. And she said, "Oh gosh, no." She goes, "I could just never have your father walk into the bedroom where I passed." She goes, "I couldn't do that to him every day." And I thought that was really just such an interesting kind of viewpoint, because again, it was the exact opposite of what I would have done for her. So having those conversations and trying to make sure you can advocate for what that person actually wants, it's going to be really important. You want to plan your team by the crisis or the event that you're trying to avoid. And as I said, that, those teams can ebb and flow. So let's look at hospitalizations first. If you have a hospitalization, the things on the left hand, you're going to want to address during that hospitalization. So do you already have home-based caregivers that you need to dismiss, that are going to come to the hospital, or the emergency department with the person you're caring for? Do you need to put holds on them? Kind of how is it that you're going to address those, especially if you have somebody who's living in your house 24 hours? And then you have home-based services. So If you have any home-based services that need to, be on pause or canceled or whatever that may be, so consider like meal delivery or grocery delivery, things like that. You're going to want to think about appointments that you've had for doctors, PT, OT, speech therapy, things like that, that are kind of on that regular basis that now have to be interrupted because of that hospitalization. Pet care. It's one of the last things people ever think about, but for the person who may be in the hospital, the care of their pet is going to be really important, and that could provide additional stress if you don't have a plan in place for that pet. And then certainly you're going to want to make sure all those legal documents that Brenna had actually mentioned before are available to that care team. So you're going to want to make sure your physician has that copy. You're going to want to make sure that the hospital has a copy. If you have like a medical record, electronic medical record, like a MyChart, you're going to want to make sure they're uploaded so that you have that. I tend to carry a copy. I keep a copy of whatever medical, are legal documents that I need for the person I'm caring for. I keep them in the glove compartment of my car because I know if I have to go anywhere, I'm going to drive. So I know that I'm going to have them there. I tend to email myself those documents too, just so that I can access them wherever I am. Just, again, just to make sure that I have them. So if you have that hospitalization, you're going to think about, okay, who's available to help me? And you're going to want to use the services that are available at that site that you're at. So if you're in the hospital, you're going to rely on the hospitalist, the specialists that are working there in the hospital. Certainly they can communicate with the primary care physician, but you're going to want to lean on them for their expertise. As I mentioned, you're going to want to make sure your documents are available to them. Your healthcare representative is going to have to be part of that team, certainly if there's a hospitalization. So that person, if the person you're caring for is unable to make decisions on their own behalf, you want to make sure that that representative is there. There's care managers and social workers at the hospital too. So you're going to want to rely on them and engage them for their expertise and their support. Social worker is going to help you navigate through all those emotional needs, kind of understand that whole person philosophy, and help you advocate for the person you're caring for. And then that care manager or discharge planner, it may be another term that's used, is going to help you figure out what are those next steps. What's the plan post hospitalization? So again, call on those people, work with them. They're going to be able to help you navigate your next steps. Changing condition can be a little bit more complicated just because there are so many different types of changes in condition. So when you have a change of condition, you're going to have to decide, is hospitalization necessary? Is hospitalization warranted? So does the person you're caring for want to be hospitalized? Do they need to, have they made a decision to not do that? And so have those conversations. And then think about, is that the best place for the person I'm caring for, given the condition that they may be, the ongoing condition they may be dealing with? So is urgent care better? It's smaller, it's quicker, but maybe telehealth is the way to go. And does your primary care physician actually offer telehealth visits? Do you have something like telehealth visits through your insurance? So a telehealth may be better than getting somebody up out of the house to the hospital, to the emergency department. Is additional care needed? And then is that affordable? And so that's where you're going to call on that financial planner to be able to help you with that and trying to figure out kind of what are those next steps. And is that additional care even possible in the current living situation, depending on if you're home or not? Can care like what's needed be provided at home, or do you need a different level of care? And then is it end of life care? And is that planning necessary now? So again, thinking ahead. But those changes of condition, again, you're going to want to think about who is available from the hospital, from the facility that you're working at. So if you are in facility-based care, you're going to want to use that facility-based team. If you're at the hospital and that level of care can't be provided at home, then you're going to want to think about what facility-based care is available. And again, a couple of slides ago, I'd mentioned you're going to want to think about facility-based care, because if you're in the hospital and you need to make a decision, you have such a limited amount of time to do that. You don't have time to do research. and you're going to rely on the people in the hospital to help you make those decisions, and they may not be able to. So do all of that research in advance. Visit assisted livings, visit nursing homes, figure out, what you want, what's important to you, so that you have a sense of where the person you're caring for may go. Certainly the urgent care, the emergency room team is going to be, that person that you're going to rely on to say, okay, what are the next steps? Where are we going from? You can consult with your primary care physician. You also can use a care coordinator. There could be a care coordinator in the facility that you're at, or the hospital that you're at, but you can also hire a care coordinator as well. And that may be something that you want to consider, so that you have somebody who can help you navigate all the different options that are out there, depending on the situation that you're in. And a care coordinator can be somebody that you have that's available during that crisis time, or somebody that's available for you ongoing. There's all kinds of scenarios in which the care coordinator can set up a situation with you. Certainly your healthcare representative is always going to be that person that you want to be available in case decisions need to be made. You may need skilled home care, and in that case, you're going to want to be able to use that skilled home care team. And a skilled home care team can bring somebody in from a nurse, all the way through social work, through PTOT, ST. Like, they're going to be able to bring in aides to be able to help. So they're going to have a wide variety of resources for you. You may need short-term rehab. And so in a short-term rehab, you're going to use that team that's there as well. And again, that's going to be nurses, it's going to be aides, it's going to be a social worker. You're going to be able to pull on that team for that help. You may want to ask if a hospital home program is available, and that would be available through the hospital to set up for a post-hospital care for that change in condition. Is there a mobile crisis team? Mobile crisis teams are available, especially for mental health services that you may need, that's emergent and that can come actually to your home. So be able to have that information ready. And then certainly if you have a therapist, a mental health provider, and that could be for the person you're caring for or for you. So remember, all of these things that you're kind of trying to plan for are still really emotionally based. They're still, they're still stressful, even if you have a plan. And so make sure that both you and the person you're caring for have the proper support. Then you have weather events. I find it really interesting in all the families that I've worked for, kind of all the work that we've done, weather events seems to be the last thing that people think about. And yet that could be a really stressful time, especially when weather events are preventing caregivers from reaching the person you're caring for. If a weather event is preventing you from reaching the person you're caring for, or if the person you're caring for needs electricity or needs certain things that the weather event now has interrupted. So you want to think about things like, who is your backup caregiver? And is a backup caregiver available in advance? Can you plan for that weather event to say, hey, I'm probably going to need you, so like make sure that person's available? Is it an agency that you're going to be able to call? Is it a neighbor that you're going to be able to call? I always say, make friends with your neighbors because you want somebody who's close by, who could probably be there within walking distance to be able to assist. Do you have enough medication to last the weather event? So, I always recommend to all the people that I work with to say, get your prescriptions filled. Don't wait to say, oh yeah, I got 5 days. Well, sometimes, snow prevents us from being able to get out for 5 days, or if there's an extended period of time where electricity isn't available, the pharmacy may not be able to open or even check you out. And so you're going to want to make sure that you have enough of that medication. Do you need a generator? And think about that for somebody who may be on oxygen. So that is going to be a necessary thing, because you're going to need electricity to run that oxygen concentrator. Your portables may not be able to last, for days, and certainly you won't be able to charge any of those batteries. Did you pre-charge your cell phones, and do you have external battery packs? So again, you're going to want to make sure all those things are pre-charged. You're going to want to make sure that they're available. take out a radio, take out the flashlights, the extra blankets, the candles, the lanterns, the firewood, try to have those things in advance of that weather event, just so that you are prepared and you're not, sludging through snow to get, firewood that's outside. Or if it's getting chilly and you're only working off a fire and around a fireplace, you have those extra blankets that are available and you're not, rummaging around in the dark. And then think about an evacuation plan. Do you have an evacuation plan if there's a flood? Do you have an evacuation plan if there isn't electricity and you need to get somebody out? And so an evacuation plan may not necessarily just be where you're going to go, but who's going to help you get there? Do you need, can you just use a regular car? Are you going to need a wheelchair? Are you going to need transport? Are you going to need, a stretcher? Kind of all of those things. And remember, if we're having a weather event that could be, statewide, if we're having a weather event that's even just a part of the state, all the emergency personnel are going to be doing other things as well. So just to say, well, emergency personnel is going to be there, they may not be able to get there quickly. And so you're going to want to make sure that you've planned for that. So thinking about who's on your team, those backup caregivers, those families and neighbors that could be there. Is it somebody that maybe needs to go and stay with the person that you're caring for in anticipation of that weather event? Again, this is where you can pull on that care coordinator that you may have hired into your care team. They can help you navigate all those different things. You may want to think of facility-based care. All facilities are going to have generators. They are going to continue to be able to operate even in the worst of weather conditions. And if they're affected by, weather condition, I don't know, a hurricane blows the roof off, they already have emergency plans where they're backed up and can evacuate to other locations. So facility-based care may be something to think about for somebody who is really compromised and may need assistance during that time. And then if you have any home-based services in place, you're going to want to talk to that team in advance too, to say, well, what do you do during those emergencies? How do we know what the backup caregiver can do? Do you drive people to their assignments? How is it that home-based services team is going to work with you and help you plan for these weather events and plan for that crisis? Actually, let me go back just 1 second. I'm thinking of, this came up for me, certainly we've had tons of, weather events and snow and things like that. But a couple of years ago, we had that tornado down in kind of the Hamden area. And I know it hit other parts of Connecticut, but most of my clients were in the Hamden area at the time. And I had 2 older women that were living together on a street that you could not reach because the largest trees you've ever seen were all knocked down and blocking the entrance, both entrances to their street. And the only way for us to be able to get there was actually to climb. We had to climb over trees. We had to climb, through it. And I got to tell you, no emergency personnel wanted us around there because there were wires down and it was unsafe. But they had to really think about, gosh, it was days before their street was even passable. And so they had to think about, okay, we've had damage to the house. Are there other parts of the house that we can live in? They had to make sure that they had oil in place. They had to make sure that they had, their generator was working. They had to make sure all of these different things. And so luckily, they were good planners and they had these things in advance, because a tornado sometimes is unpredictable. It's not like snow when we can anticipate how much snow we're going to get. So when I think about weather events, I think about the things that you have a few days to plan for, and then I think about the things that just happen, and you need to be able to make sure that you have, a plan in place, and luckily they did. And then certainly end of life planning, kind of life completion. What team do you need in place? But what is it that the person that you're caring for wants? Kind of what are their goals? And you heard Brenna talk a lot about this. What was important to her dad at the end, and making sure that they were able to do that, and then the team around them was able to make sure that those things happened. You're going to want to make sure that you have the right documents that you need in place. Have you decided whether you're going to be dying at home or in a hospice facility or in another facility-based care setting? And what is it that the person who wants? Again, remember, I would have bet my life that my mother wanted to be able to die at home, because who wants to die in a hospital? Like, I was just like, Mom. And nope, for her, she couldn't do that to my dad. And so her plan then changed dramatically when we started thinking of that and what it would look like for her. Has the person, have you notified important people? Are you facilitating goodbyes? Are you kind of getting ready for that? And what's most important now? So those are all the things you're going to want to be able to address. And then the care team, who you pull into that care team at that time, is going to be able to help you do that. So again, you're going to have your primary care physician be part of that. Certainly you can bring in your care coordinator, the social worker, whatever setting that you're at. If you're using hospice or palliative care, you're going to want to use that care team. And they are a tremendous resource, because again, they have physicians and they have nurses and they have social workers, but they also have chaplains and they have art therapists and they have, music therapists, and they have different kinds of other supports that can really look at that whole person. Your healthcare representative is going to be really important at this time. You're going to want to make sure that you have those living will advance directive documents, those legal documents that you need. You may need a pain specialist, and that's somebody that you can pull into your team at that time, depending on the level of pain that the person you're caring for is having. You may have your home care team. You may be home and not using hospice services, and that's okay. So what does your home care team do for comfort care measures? And you're going to want to talk to them about that in advance. And then certainly, as Brenna is, as she's mentioned, you could also have a death doula. Death doulas are becoming much, much more popular. And so you can have a death doula that you've talked to and have hired to be able to help you navigate everything that happens at end of life and after somebody has passed. They can help your family kind of digest this information and help work through feelings as well. And then certainly if there's a spiritual religious leader that you're going to want to pull in for that person as well. Trying to, again, look very holistically at what that person may need. So you're going to want to be prepared and supported, certainly when you're looking at what kind of care transitions team you need, but you're going to want to consider all the needs. So I mentioned before, you're going to want to start big and then narrow down. So after you've planned for those bigger needs, after you've planned for the different kinds of crises that could happen, start to narrow things down to address the frequent needs. So what do you need just currently managing a condition, currently managing a care situation? What do you need monthly and quarterly? So is your medical provider accessible? If your PCP is not as accessible as you'd like, is there a nurse in the office that is? Is there an APRN? Do you have a portal, a medical portal, where you can just like email the doctor, quick questions versus having to set up appointments? I love that option that we have now in our medical portals for electronic health records. It's amazing to be able to have that quick access. I mentioned before, is telehealth an option? So do you have telehealth doctor calls? Is there 24-hour nurse hotlines that those can be part of your insurance as well to be thinking about? Is there facility-based living benefits that you may want to think about, and a team, and again, mobile crisis? So who can help you manage kind of all of those moving pieces? Certainly that care coordinator, an aging life care specialist, or a geriatric care manager. These are some of the aging life care specialist is some of the newer terms that are out there, but certainly that is a person that you can hire to kind of help you navigate all the different things that are happening. Their job is to know all the options that are available and to help you access those, whether it's filling out paperwork, whether it's talking to somebody, whether it's just helping you make an educated decision. And then what are the needs in the management of what we call IADLs, or those instrumental activities of daily living? A lot of the time we think about, physical care and the hands-on care, which is really important. But it's also important to understand kind of what are those other things that help somebody manage their day-to-day life so that they feel as independent as possible. Who's helping with housekeeping and maintenance needs? Is there a community-based program or a home-based program that can provide regular check-ins, make referrals to other home and community-based services and resources? Again, who's going to help take care of the pet? If there's a change in condition or if there's a functional need change, pet care is still going to be important. Nobody's going to say, well, I'm going to get rid of the dog now. You're still going to want your dog around. So is there additional support that you can bring in for that? Is there durable medical equipment that you may need? And so sometimes, as great as Amazon is, you can get things. Sometimes it can take more than 3 days to get. We saw this a lot during the pandemic where durable medical equipment was at a very high need and we were using that all across the country, but it was taking days and days to get there. If we asked for durable medical equipment through insurance, I remember for one of my clients who had just broken his pelvis, the estimated delivery of his wheelchair was a month, and he could not walk. So we had to scramble and get him a wheelchair. But there are durable medical equipment closets. You can anticipate in advance and get those into your home so that you have them. And then certainly if there's any type of durable medical equipment that you have that needs ongoing maintenance. So oxygen, again, ongoing maintenance, you're going to want to make sure that there's somebody who's on a regular basis kind of being able to address the management of those. So narrowing down even further, what do you need on the weekly basis? What do you need on the day-to-day basis? So there's IADL needs that may be on that weekly day-to-day basis, but then there's also those ADLs, those activities of daily living that are more of those hands-on care. So your team at that point may be your caregiver agency or the private caregivers that you may have hired. It may be physical, occupational, and speech therapies and have those therapists, whether they're outpatient appointments or they're coming to your home. Transportation providers, what type of transportation do you need? Is it just transportation to doctor's appointments? Is it transportations to church? Is it transportation to a social event that's really important, like a book club Brenna mentioned? You're going to want to make sure that you have that transportation that's available, and there's different options that are available out there. Go-Go Grandparent, I really don't love the name, but Go-Go Grandparent is an option. They are a concierge type service that uses Uber and Lyft, but they focus on seniors. They focus on people with physical changes in their body that need additional support. And so the drivers go through additional training for that. There's sunshine transportation, there's ambulance services. So you're going to want to look at what kind of transportation providers do you need. Meal delivery and food preparations, what type of support do you need there? Is there a family member who's going to drop food off, every day? Are you going to be using delivery services? Do you just need groceries delivered? So think about all of those types of preparations for food and for nutrition. And then certainly if there's any day programs, adult day health programs are available. They usually provide transportation. They can be done every day, half days, 3 times a week. So that may be able to not only give the person you're caring for some stimulation and socialization and support, because there are medical services that can be provided, but can also give caregivers a break too. And when you're forming your transition care team, you always want to be able to plan for beyond the physical, beyond those functional needs, again, looking at that whole person. Right? What mental health support is needed? What spiritual support is needed? Social and emotional support. Emotional support, again, can be both for both you and the person you're caring for. So there could be support groups. Support groups are available in person and certainly online. There are condition-specific organizations and groups. So if you have a particular condition or diagnosis, then reach out to see if they have an association that can provide you with resources and help you navigate through some of that. There are age-related groups, certainly. And the last, you may or may not be familiar, but death cafes. So death cafes is actually, it's actually a nationwide, now it's going globally, but death cafes is an opportunity for people who want to talk about death and dying, not necessarily because they're dying, but because they want to plan, they want to talk about things. And it could be from planning to the emotional piece of it, or how do I start these conversations, with my family, wonder if, my wishes are different than what my family wants, so it helps people navigate through all of that. And then certainly, just as we had said, you want to be able to consider the unexpected. So who's available when there's an emergency? And I think of kind of those sensitive check-ins. So if you get a call, you're at work, or you're, at a doctor's appointment for yourself, who's available to say, oh my gosh, like, is there somebody really quick that can run over? Maybe, a family or a friend, a neighbor, hired caregivers, who can you call on during that time to make sure that the person you're caring for is okay? And then, of course, caregivers need support too. So who helps you? You really need to think about that. And it's very easy when you're in the middle of caring for somebody else that you forget about your own needs. A friend of mine was just telling me, she's like, I haven't gotten a mammogram in 2 years because she's been caring for people in her family. And she finally just went and they found a mass. And so you need to be able to make sure that you're keeping up with your own care needs, and making sure that you're getting an outlet so that you can continue to be the best caregiver that you can be. So think about whether you need a therapist, if there's an employee assistance program that you can be using to help you understand what resources are available, especially if caregiving is new. Is there respite care? And respite care can be facility-based care, that you just need to take a break, you need to go on a vacation, you need to take a long weekend, whatever it is. But is respite care an option? Are there friends and family connections that you can use? Are there people that can come and help you, give you a little bit of time off? Lean on those associations, again, based on your condition or your diagnosis. Reach out to those associations for expertise and resources. And then keep up with your own doctors, keep up with your own exercise regime, your own meditations, or spiritual needs. You want to do that all for yourself as well. One of the biggest things in dealing with caregivers, both within my own family, with friends, and in my professional life, is that sometimes it's hard to be able to let other people in because you're navigating so much and you're juggling so much that you're like, oh my gosh, if somebody else comes in, I may drop a ball, I may break a plate, what's going to happen? So you want to be able to be open to accept help, and I know that can be difficult. You're going to want to ask for specific help. I had a friend who was taking care of her father with Lewy body dementia. And she had 3 brothers, and the brothers were like nowhere to be found. And yet they were calling all the time to say like, hi, how can I help you? Or what else can I do? And she's like, I can't even think about what they can do. Like, I don't even have a minute to think about it. But she was a nurse. She had been in long-term care her whole career. So she kind of knew what to do, but her brothers had no idea. They didn't even know the questions to ask. They didn't even know what to offer for help. And so in her and I talking, I said, they can't read your mind. If you need them to come over and do laundry, tell them to come over and do laundry. You want to be very specific in what you're asking for help. And just know that you aren't alone. You have friends and family. There are people out here who want to be able to help you, whether you've hired them or whether they're part of your, your family group, but you aren't alone. And so make sure that you call on others. And then how do you ensure that you have the best care? How do you know, like, you have this team in place now, how do you make sure that the care and the wishes of the person you're caring for are being carried out? There's really no kind of, right answer for this, but I always say, trust your instincts. If you're caring for somebody, it's because that you love that person and you know what that person wants, you know what that person needs. So trust your instincts, right? Are the goals that you've established, are they being met? Is the person you're caring for happy? Are they content? Are they safe? Are they fulfilled? Are their goals, is their purpose kind of being met? Is your team communicating? Is somebody just sort of doing a little bit and like leaving and then they go radio silent? So think about, what's the availability of your team? Are they communicating with you? And don't ever be afraid to ask questions. If you're caring for somebody and you're kind of navigating all of this, ask those questions. You have every right to do that and make sure that your team is working for you and the person that you're caring for. So Steve, I think I made it with a minute to spare. I am certainly open to any questions. People can throw them in the chat or we can take them now. It's quite up to you.
Yeah, I was thinking about Michelle. I was going back. Oh yeah, I remember that power outage, and I remember going through the tornado, and because we had an issue. I mean, my dad is on medication that required us to keep his medication cold, and we didn't have power for 7 days.
Yeah.
And we got lucky. I had a small generator that was just enough to power the mini fridge and keep it going and maybe charge a few things. But yeah, it was interesting, but it was also nice to see is the community coming together. We saw, one of the state reps was running a drive, and if you got power back or had an extra generator, they were driving them over to people's neighborhoods and putting them in the back of trucks so they could charge their devices. And it is important to have a storm plan. And we are in New England, so we could get a tornado one year and a 4-foot snowstorm the next.
Exactly.
So, and a couple of the good comments that came in. A little bit of laughter goes a long way. I agree. And Pam, Patricia said, I find when it's time to ask for help, being a new caregiver, I think saying it can be difficult, and I agree. It's where I don't know, Michelle, what is your advice? How should people ask, and when should they ask? Because what I tend to see is people are afraid to ask for help.
Yeah, I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's because we're New Englanders and we feel like we can do it on our own. We're tough. I don't know if it's because they don't even know what to ask. And that's okay too, to have those conversations with people, to say, I don't even know where to start. I don't even know what to say, yes, you can help me, because I don't know what to tell you. But then, just having that conversation of like, here are the things I'm dealing with on a day-to-day basis, or here's what happens once a month. It may just be enough for somebody to come over every week and take out the trash, so that you don't even have to think about it. It may be enough to just know that you have a neighbor who has a key that can come and walk the dog. So really think about starting big and then narrowing down and say, okay, where is it that I can ask for support or help? And it's okay. People want to help. We always think like we're a burden, asking for help for others, but people want to. Think about how good you feel when you're giving support to somebody else and you're giving help to somebody else. Others want to feel that same way.
And one of the comments that came in is that there's a fear of rejection that can be an issue for asking for help and not wanting to burden somebody. And that's true.
Yep.
And what I also find is interesting is, and I might have been guilty of this and may still be a little guilty of this, is when people offer help, we don't take it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of us think it's like a badge of honor if we don't need that help and support, but all you're doing is really just hurting yourself in the end. So be vulnerable, take that risk. You may get rejected, and then you know what? But caregivers are some of the most resilient people I know. They're problem solvers, and you can say, okay, that didn't work. That didn't work. Maybe it's how I asked. Maybe it was the person I asked. That didn't work. Maybe it's the type of care. Let me try something else. So,
yeah. Appreciate it. Thank you, Michelle. We really appreciate you coming. We appreciate you coming back for the lunch panel as well.
My pleasure.